My name is Kate, and I'm 40 years old. I've been married to my husband Mason for 10 years. We're both the same age and used to work together at the same job. Now, we work in different departments. Mason is a responsible man who is well liked by the people who work under him. He's also a bit proud and doesn't like to show any weaknesses. He used to be a confident, bold, and strong man. His bosses always praised his work, and everyone expected him to get promoted easily. On the other hand, I'm more of a quiet and private person. I was surprised when Mason showed so much interest in me, especially since we have such different personalities. After 2 years of dating, he proposed to me with a huge bouquet of roses. I had never felt so loved by a man, so I immediately said yes. I was excited to start our new life together. But what we didn't expect was that we would have to live with his parents. There was no discussion about it, and I didn't want to. But Mason insisted. He said, "My parents are nice people, and everything will be fine." He explained how much they were looking forward to us living with them, so I didn't want to argue. So, we've been living with his parents for the past 10 years. It was hard at first. Every morning, my mother-in-law would criticize me. "Kate, you forgot to clean the entrance again," she would say, just after I finished making breakfast. This happened every day. I would apologize, but she'd tell me, "Just saying sorry isn't enough. If you understand, go and do it right away." Even though I had to go to work, I was treated like a servant in the morning. For 10 years, I've been waking up at 5 a.m. to cook breakfast and clean. My mother-in-law doesn't do any housework herself, even though she's a housewife. I rush through my chores, go to work, come back, and immediately start cooking dinner. By the time I went to bed, I was so tired, I could barely keep my eyes open. This daily routine has drained me, and I often feel sick because of the stress. My mother-in-law would keep telling me, "Do the cleaning properly. I don't want the neighbors to think we're not taking care of the house." She would say this while relaxing in the living room, eating the breakfast I made. She'd also remind me, "If you don't finish quickly, you'll be late for work." Despite all this, my husband never stood up for me. My father-in-law would sit quietly behind his newspaper and pretend he didn't see anything. Living with my in-laws has been difficult, and the stress has caused me to lose weight. I look unhealthy now, and my period stopped because of the weight loss. I've been unable to get pregnant. Still, my mother-in-law kept blaming me for everything. Before we got married, I used to care about my appearance and stay healthy, but now, I don't look the same at all. The mistreatment and the shock of seeing how I look in the mirror have made me feel depressed. I became so submissive to my mother-in-law that I lost all motivation to do anything, even leaving the house. During this time, I received the sad news that my father had passed away in an accident. I hadn't been to my parents' house in a long time because my mother-in-law and husband would always criticize me for wanting to visit. I regret not going more, especially when I heard that my father had passed away. My parents' house is about an hour away from my in-laws, so it's not far. I asked Mason and his parents if they would come with me to my father's funeral. When I mentioned it, they quickly interrupted. "We won't be going, just have your family there." I was shocked by how cold they were. I just said, "I understand," trying to hold back my anger and sadness. The funeral had many attendees because my father was well known, and many people admired him. It was clear from their tears how much my father was loved. When I saw my mother, she was startled by how much weight I had lost. "Kate, it's been a while. What happened to you?" she asked with concern. I tried to brush it off, saying, "Oh, it's nothing." She seemed more worried. "Are you sick? I can't bear to lose you too." Her eyes filled with tears, thinking I had some serious illness after just losing my father. I reassured her, "I'm not sick, Mom, please don't worry." We settled down to take a break in the waiting room, and she asked, "If you're not sick, then what's going on?" That's when I started to tell her about the treatment I had been getting from my in-laws. "Well, it's like what they call bride bullying. I'm just so exhausted." As I spoke, I looked down, and my mother's expression showed her worry. "I'm glad you're not sick, but I can't relax knowing this. Is this why you haven't been visiting more often? I nodded, and my mother handed me a piece of paper. Read this and think carefully about what to do next, she said. The paper was my father's will. He had planned everything carefully in case something happened, and it included details about his inheritance. I'm leaving you $790, 000, the will said. You can't decide how to use it. I was stunned by the amount. At the same time, I felt a sense of hope, because this money could help me escape my in-laws' house. With this inheritance, I could build my own home and leave them right away. I felt like my life was finally starting to improve thanks to what my father had left me. When I returned home to my in-laws' house, I continued doing the housework like usual. On days when I had plans, the house seemed even messier than normal because no one else cleaned. As I quietly did the chores, my mind kept going back to the $790, 000 I had inherited from my father. Although I had anger toward my mother-in-law, I still wanted to stay with my husband, so I decided to tell him the truth about the large inheritance and suggest that we move out of my in-laws' house. One night, after my in-laws had gone to bed and we were alone, I said, I have something to talk about. Yeah, what is it? My husband asked. I took a deep breath and said, it's about my dad. I'm going to inherit his estate. Oh, really? He replied, looking surprised. How much? Well, it's $790, 000. When I told him the amount, he looked shocked, like he couldn't believe it. What? Are you serious? He asked. Yes, $790, 000, I said. Once he realized I wasn't joking, he smiled and said, wow, he left that much to you. That's so generous. Now that he was in a good mood, I decided to bring up the idea of using the money to build a house for just the two of us. But before I could say anything, he said something unbelievable. We need to transfer the money to my mom's bank account right away. I didn't understand at first. It sounded so ridiculous that I thought he was joking. Wait, why? I inherited the money, so that's not right. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But then, he slammed his hand on the table, looking angry. What kind of nonsense are you talking about? A wife's money belongs to her mother-in-law. He said it with such seriousness that I felt scared. I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you're saying, I said, confused and shocked. I just wanted to talk about building a home for us. They kept insisting that my inheritance should go to his mother. That night, I was so shocked that I couldn't sleep. The next morning, while I was making breakfast, my husband and mother-in-law came up to me, both looking angry. So, Kate, my mother-in-law started, I heard you inherited $790, 000, but you said you wouldn't give it to me. What are you thinking? It turned out my husband had already told her about the inheritance. I'm the one who inherited it, I said, trying to explain. Stop arguing, she snapped. Just transfer it to my mom's account right now. A wife's money is the family's money, right? Both of them seemed determined to take the inheritance. No matter how much I resisted, instead of listening to me, they just blamed me. Feeling like resistance was pointless, I stayed silent. My husband then showed me a piece of paper. You're getting too full of yourself just because you've come into some money, he said. What's with the attitude? I'm the one who supports you. If you don't change your mind, I'll divorce you. The paper he handed me was a divorce form, already filled out with his part completed. Take this and go back to your parents' house, he said. If you apologize properly, I might reconsider the divorce. I looked at the divorce paper in my hands, and all my memories came rushing back. I realized I had never been supported in this house. I paid half the living expenses, but all the housework was on me. I had never been cared for, yet my husband and his mother always looked down on me. In the end, they even tried to take my father's money. If I stayed there, I might give in to their pressure and hand over the inheritance, but this money was left to me by my father, and I knew I couldn't let it go. In a way, this divorce offer was a chance to leave. Holding the filled-out divorce form, I finally had control over my future. I promised myself that I would never give up my father's inheritance and made up my mind. That evening, after work, I went back to my parents' house. I said. Welcome back, sweetie, my mother said, smiling warmly. I had a feeling you'd be coming home soon. She greeted me with her home-cooked meal on the table. After everything I'd been through, I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten a meal prepared by someone else. As I tasted the warm food, I was moved to tears. It tasted so good. Did you tell Mason about the inheritance? My mother asked. Yes, and that's when things got complicated. I told my mother everything about what my husband and mother-in-law had said. She was shocked by the things they had done. The inheritance is yours, and you're the one who gets to decide how to live from now on, my mother said as tears filled my eyes. She gently put her arm around me. After staying at my mother's house for a week, I decided to return to my in-laws' house. Well, I'm going now, I said. Take care, my mother replied. I was no longer afraid to go back. With a refreshed mindset, I headed back to my in-laws' house. When I arrived, my husband and mother-in-law were waiting for me, arms crossed. Finally back. My husband asked, have you reflected on your actions? Yes, I'm sorry. Please let me stay in this house again, I said, giving an apology that didn't feel sincere. My mother-in-law smirked and said, then hurry up and give us the inheritance. Actually, the inheritance process is taking longer than expected, I replied. It's still not with me. It's a complicated process, so it will probably take another 6 months or more. It takes that long. Well, that's fine, they said, satisfied, thinking I would obediently give them the inheritance, but they kept criticizing me for staying at my mother's house for a week. The house is a mess because you didn't do your duties as a wife. Clean it up quickly, they said. It was unbelievable how messy and unsanitary the house had become after just 1 week. It was impressive how dirty they managed to make it in such a short time. In the past, I would have been upset seeing the house in this state, but things were different now. I didn't care about being bullied by my mother-in-law or doing all the hard housework. I just did what she ordered, without protest. 10 months later, it was my mother-in-law's birthday. We're going now. Make sure the house stays clean, she said. She always went on a trip for her birthday, and of course, they never took me along. By the way, have you received the inheritance yet? It's supposed to arrive today, she asked. I knew the inheritance wouldn't arrive just in time for her birthday, but I didn't say anything. I just smiled and said, take care and have a safe trip. Once they were gone, I started putting my plan into action. I had been waiting for this moment for a long time. They'd be shocked when they returned from their trip, but that wasn't my concern anymore. I quickly packed up my things and left the house. Wow, this is amazing, I thought as I moved into my new home. I had used my father's inheritance to build this house. I was so happy to live in such a beautiful place. I invited my mother to live with me, and we were both happy not to have to deal with my in-laws anymore. I sank into the soft sofa, feeling content. Today was a celebration of our new home. My mother and I hired a chef and had a luxurious day together. The next evening, I got a phone call from my husband. Hey, what's going on? He asked, confused since all my things were gone. I won't be coming back. Goodbye, I said, trying to hang up, not wanting to talk to him anymore. But then I heard my mother-in-law yelling on the other end. What the hell do you think you're doing? Where are you now? I didn't answer. You told me to clean the house, so I packed my things. That's not funny. Besides, you haven't transferred the inheritance yet, I said. How many times do I have to tell you? A daughter-in-law's money belongs to me, she yelled. I replied calmly, I'm single now, you know. My mother-in-law suddenly went quiet. Well, I'm actually divorced, I continued. I submitted the divorce papers Mason gave me. We're strangers now. Goodbye. I hung up the phone, imagining the shocked look on my mother-in-law's face. I couldn't stop laughing. My heart felt so light now that I was no longer involved with that family. After that, my ex-husband called me many times. Whenever I had time, I would purposefully answer the phone and let the abusive words from both my ex-husband and his mother flow. I recorded those calls from start to finish. I decided to take those recordings to the police. Harassment from an ex-husband isn't uncommon, and the police said they would issue a warning before it got dangerous. Thankfully, they acted quickly and went to my ex-in-law's house to give the warning. For my image-conscious ex-in-laws, having the police show up was enough of a blow. Plus, one of my ex-husband's subordinates, who lived nearby, saw the police. Since my ex was well known in his company, the rumor spread fast. His subordinates and colleagues who didn't like him exaggerated the story, and bad rumors about him started circulating. Eventually, the gossip reached my department. One day, I heard people talking about it. So, I heard the police came. I'm divorced now, so I don't know much about it, I said. The bullying from my mother-in-law and my husband's abuse was too much, I added, speaking just loud enough for others to hear. The gossip-loving employees quickly spread the news further. It didn't take long for my ex-husband's boss to find out about it. You've got quite a lot of bad rumors going around, he said. I hate men who can cherish their wives, he continued. With all these bad rumors, our reputation is suffering too. So, I decided to transfer you. My ex-husband was transferred to the branch with the worst performance. It was in a remote area, with no entertainment or anything nearby, and was called a landlocked island. He understood that this transfer meant the end of his career and any chance of future promotions. He had no choice but to accept it and move. As for my ex-mother-in-law, she must have been shocked by the loss of her son's good reputation and the fact that they couldn't live together anymore. She became a complete shut-in and eventually developed depression. It seemed she also had dementia, as she often caused disturbances at home. My ex-father-in-law had to take care of his wife as her condition worsened. Even though she wasn't related to me by blood, she was still family, and he took his responsibility seriously. The consequences of their years of harassment finally caught up with them. Now, my mother and I are living happily together. We even started gardening in our spacious yard. If I had stayed in the house, I would have never discovered such a wonderful hobby. Gardening has brought me new energy, and my health, which had suffered from stress, is now better. I'm so happy to have cut ties with my ex-in-laws and started a new chapter in my life.